Oh, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 10 of the Matt Mettler podcast broadcast. I am your host, Matt Mettler. It feels very good to be here talking to you right now, man. If you are within the sound of my voice, then you're my listeners and you're the shit. You're awesome. Not only are you discriminating as far as having good taste, but you are also the best listeners in the world. I know that for a fact because you're here listening to my show, man, and that makes you the greatest listeners in the world. And I just want to thank you for that. You guys rock. This episode, I'm going to go all over the place this episode. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I'm going to touch a lot of topics in this episode, but I think that you guys can keep up. I think that as long as I do it right, I think you guys will be able to keep up. When you go get a Reiki massage, like you think of your intention for the session, right? My intention for the session is to talk about the quest for meaning and fulfillment and pursuing that which truly inspires us. It's been very weird. This has been a weird time in my life. I've had a lot of time to think about things. I've had a lot of time to think about where I've been, what I've done, what I want to do, where I want to go. And what I've learned in that is that life is the ever-moving rainbow. The goals in your life are an ever-moving rainbow. And what I mean by that is the closer you get to it, the further it moves away. And that's just the way that dreams and rainbows work. Now, that's not saying you can't attain your dreams, but what I'm going to say is that our dreams change over time, right? Often, once we get to where we wanted to go, we look around and we find that it's not what we thought it was going to be. There's the rub. Nothing is. Nothing is what we think it will be when we start the path. And the real lesson is nothing is what we think it is, and everything is what we think it is. That's God's sense of humor smiling on us right there. Yeah. As I've gotten more mature, I realize, man, that we cannot fix or change something if we will not or cannot talk about it or acknowledge that thing's existence. Right now, we're living in denial. And it's not just the river in Egypt, man. It's a place in America where a lot of people are living where they don't want to talk about things that make them uncomfortable. And they don't want to have the hard conversations. And the hard conversations are always the awkward ones. Time to get my frosty beverage. On the small business tip, man, there's a business having a grand reopening, and I want to make sure to mention them. The Hot-Chick-A-Latte down on East Colfax. They are in a building that was, for the 25 years that I've lived in Denver, I've been driving down Colfax. I've been looking at things as they've changed. And the building that they were in held about 30 different businesses in the many years before they were there. And then the Hot-Chick-A-Lattes came along, and they were there for, I think they did 8 years in their first run, and they closed down for a little bit. It is now under new management, and they are open. And if you've never been to the Hot-Chick-A-Latte, when they originally opened, there was a lot of controversy around the outfits that they would wear while they would work there. It's a little bit saucy. It's a little bit racy, right? But it's fun. It's fun. And the girls, when you go there, they are a blast. And I guarantee you that when you go and see them, they're going to make sure that you have a fun time. And then when you get past all of that, they have amazing coffee drinks. They have some of the most amazing coffee drinks in Denver. That's just truth, man. That's just truth. They have one that I really love. It's called a banana hammock. It's kind of funny that that's the same name as that concentrate I had in the last episode. But they got a thing called a banana hammock. Man, that is delicious. It's like chocolate and banana. Oh my God. They have really great coffee. So go support a small local business, a female-owned business. Go see the girls at the Hot-Chick-A-Latte. They'll make you smile, and I guarantee it's going to be the best coffee you've had in a while. If you've never been there, you're going to be shocked at how good the coffee is. That's the part that's going to blow your mind. You're going to be like, wow, okay, I was expecting less. So yeah, go see the girls at the Hot-Chick-A-Latte down on Colfax. They just reopened under new management. They could use all of our support from the community. And it's a really fun place to go get a drink. So that is what I'm going to say about the Hot-Chick-A-Lattes. My next brief topic, another thing that I've learned is that each person sees the world from their own perspective and learns life's lessons in their own time. And I do believe that we all learn the same lessons, but we each learn them in a different order. And that has a distinct effect on the outcome of the individual. The order that you learn the lessons in has something to do with how the individual turns out in the end, right? My last note about the ever-moving rainbow is there is a component of been there, done that. So I know that for myself, going back over the milestones that I've already accomplished and revisiting them is nice. But I think my dreams have changed. My dreams have metamorphosized into something else. And what is so weird for me is that society has completely changed. Society right now has shifted gears into some weird hybridized version of itself that pivots on and hinges around the internet. And we never used to have that. Just as recently as 1995, we didn't really have that. So this phenomenon that's been going on for 24 years, 97, let's call it from 97 until about 2019. Yeah, about 24 years. Think about how much humanity and the world and how we do business, all of that has changed dramatically because of the internet. For as much as it's making some people smarter, it's making a lot of other people less smart. It's making a lot of other people stunted in their growth. That's the most bizarre thing about it, right? Is unlimited access to information should imbue curiosity and the desire to learn things in people, right? But that's not necessarily true. You've got people out there who have access to the internet where they could learn practically anything, and they don't. They just choose not to. I don't know where we go with that exactly, but it's a choice, right? The internet is a weird thing, and it has changed how we do everything. It changed how we date. It's changed how we get jobs. It changed how we live our lives. The desire to post a version of oneself that exists without flaws. It's weird because the internet, at least from the perspective of our personal profiles, it should reflect the reality of our lives, but in some way it doesn't. Like, we're trying to produce lives that look more amazing and interesting than they really are to impress other people who really don't care. That's the funniest part, right? This isn't a contest versus me and all the other people in the world. It's a contest to see if I can become the best version of me, right? It doesn't have anything to do with being better than everybody else. It simply has to do with trying to be the best me. Oh, man. Yeah. My next brief topic that I want to talk about is in the vein of talking about mixed messages, because in past episodes, I've talked about how the world sends a lot of mixed messages. I was thinking about this mixed message that's out there right now of the contradictory ideals of consumerism and being green. Like right now, we are being sold these two conflicting concepts. One is consumerism. Consumerism says buy, own, purchase, burn up that credit card, use all the money that you have, live beyond your means. That's what consumerism promotes. And then being green promotes only using the things you need, not taking more than you need, trying to recycle, trying to be appreciative of resources and the planet and recognizing that things are finite. Well, how do you believe in both of those things at the same time? Do you see how contradictory these two messages are? The idea that you should buy and be green, and that even when you buy, you can be green, which is a consumerism and a marketing thing. There's a lot of deception in the psychology of advertising, and consumerism and being green are both a marketing thing, whether we want to admit it or not. I know right now there's people in the world probably getting angry that I'm saying this stuff. Part of it is I try to just step back from the world and see the forest. Sometimes you're so close to the world that you don't see the forest for the trees. I just want to step back and take a look at all of it. And when I look at the forest of consumerism versus being green, the two of them are in opposition to each other. So I would argue that you either have to choose consumerism or you have to choose being green. You can't have both of them. Right now, that's not to say that you can't make better choices in the things that you purchase in an attempt to be more green, right? But either you are in the religion of consumerism or you are a believer in the religion of being green. And the two of those, one says use as much resources as possible, and the other side of that argument says only take what you need. Leave the rest for somebody else, right? Sometimes it's hard for adults to be okay with that. Once upon a time when we didn't have pockets, we didn't feel the need to carry shit around, right? Or we thought very hard about the things that we actually needed to survive before we carried it. So it's interesting to note how humanity's pockets have just expanded. The longer he's been around, the bigger his pockets get. It's a funny proclivity of humanity, for sure. My next topic that I just want to hit real quick was just a thought that I had about politicians. And I don't like politicians. Yeah, I don't like politicians. I understand the necessity of them, but I feel like it's such a crooked, wicked web that they're all involved in that you don't want no part of it. So in a way, anybody that's willing to touch it is... I think you guys might know what I'm inferring by that. Anybody who's willing to touch it is willing to get their hands dirty, I suppose. So the thought that I had about politicians that I wanted to relay to y'all is that politicians love Band-Aids, but they hate cures. They typically will choose that which is politically expedient versus that which is better for the long-term outcome of society or the individual as a whole. Those things are not concerns. Perception around the decision by the populace is the utmost concern to a politician who's seeking to be reelected, right? I think that the kind of politicians who actually tend to do a good job are the ones who aren't seeking reelection at all. They're the ones that are who are like, the way I look at it, I only got 4 years to do this because, man, that's all the tolerance I have for all this BS, and then I'm going to have to get out. And that was the other thing. The founding fathers did not intend for there to be career politicians. It was supposed to be something that you went and did for 4 years, and then you went back to your farm and you lived your life. It was supposed to be a shared burden that each person had to do a small amount of time, and it wasn't expected that you were going to do your whole life there. So the idea of career politicians really bugs the crap out of me. But they definitely love Band-Aids and hate cures. They just want to keep working on solving the same problems they've been trying to solve for 75 years. They don't actually want to fix anything. And that's why I say they love to institutionalize prisons and poverty and courts and rehab and all of these things. They love to institutionalize all that stuff because it makes them a giant amount of money. And it keeps people tied up in these systems. I think that's really what it's about. It's about tying people up in their system. It has nothing to do with whether you're not, you're rehabilitated or any of that. Oh, man. So, next topic. I wanted to talk about the beauty of getting older. I'm not old. I'm not by any means old, especially in the modern context. I don't even know what that means anymore because you got women who are 50 delivering babies, and I consider myself to be seasoned, right? I'm well seasoned, and I've reached the point where I'm not a hothead anymore. I've cooled down, which is really nice. Like, that's one of the good things about getting a little bit older, right? You get more confidence. You have more respect from peers and others. Your knowledge and experience comes into play. You are able to navigate the waters better because you have more knowledge and you have more experience to make your judgments on, right? So there's something to be said for being mature. There really is. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, that's for sure. Oh, and then there's the component of when you get a little bit older, a little more mature, I still care what others think, but just less. When I was 18, if everybody thought I was a dork or a nerd or something like that, I would be devastated. I'd be crushed. Everything was life or death. Now that I'm a little bit older, it's like I know that my homies love me. I know that I got friends. And if somebody has a problem, well, then it's probably their problem, man. It's probably not my problem. It's probably their problem. So all of those things come with maturity. I'm thankful for all of that stuff, man, really. I was watching this thing the other night It was on, I want to say it was on Netflix. It was about these recovering addicts. And there was a gentleman and he was up talking about his story. He said something while he was talking to this audience that he was addressing that I really liked. He didn't make this up, but it's just such good stuff. I wanted to pass it on. To the world, you're just one person. But to just one person, you're the world. We tend to forget that. And that's a great thing to remember, right? To somebody, you're the world. You, whoever you are out there listening, you are the world to somebody. Think about that. Oh, next brief thought is that everyone is going through something in their lives. So try to be kind to each other. You might be an angel in the time of need for somebody. You never know. Next brief topic is I had a great teacher in college, a great professor. His name was Lori Parkin. And Lori Parkin was, he was really old when I was in school. And he was a great guy. And he taught contract law. And he had been a lawyer for a really long time. But what was cool is since he was older, he had all this wisdom that he passed on to us, man, which was really cool. Like one of the things that he told us, he said, someday it will be your turn. And what he meant was it will be our turn to be in charge. And I think that we're very close to that someday. It's our turn to take the reins, and we can make it worse or we can make it better. I'm hoping that we do the right thing and we make it better. All right. My next brief topic is talking about Twitter. Man, in just the last episode, I was telling you how I was going to stay out of Twitter and I was going to not do it, right? Twitter sucks you in. Effing Twitter. It totally sucks you in, right? I ended up having to make a comment. I know I'm a grown-up because it's so hard for me to ignore bullshit when someone says it. Humanprogress.org had put up this post talking about if fusion makes energy too cheap to meter, about all the amazing things that were going to happen on the planet of Earth. And it was just like, we really got to spank science. It's time for us to spank science, man. And I'm serious, because to make ridiculous claims about how energy is going to be free all of a sudden is not only irresponsible, it's pipe dream type science nonsense crap. And it makes me really upset because what else is free in the world? Even if they discovered fusion energy, it ain't going to be free. And nobody's going to just give you that electricity for free. And nobody's going to do it for free. And nothing on our planet is free. So stop talking all this nonsense. It's just nonsense, right? To me, it's like what would happen is all the barons and all the people at the top would buy up that technology and make sure that they squeeze plenty of money out of it. It wouldn't end up reducing anybody's power bill a bit. It would end up making people that got a ton of money a lot more money. That's what would happen. So it was really insulting. When they posted that nonsense, I had to spank their ass and just be like, look, dude, stop. Stop with this pipe dream nonsense. And I was like, where is this fusion of which you speak? Because they've been working on fusion my entire life. Now, the messed up part, I see all these articles out right now. They're like, wow, we're getting really close. We're getting really close. Really, are we? Because for the last 47 years, we have been powering all kinds of reactors with coal power and oil and hydropower in an attempt to start some sort of nuclear reaction. But you got to reach a critical amount of energy to do that, and we haven't done that yet. So up to this point, all science has done is burned a whole lot of coal trying to fire up a nuclear reactor. You know, they need to be honest about the fact that, are they really close to fusion? Really? If you are, man, I'm dying to see it. And I'm less optimistic that it's going to just suddenly make electricity so ridiculously cheap that it, come on, give me a break, people. That was the other part that really annoyed me, is that it's something for nothing. And that isn't how our society is structured at all currently. One of the things that I want to do with this show is, I don't know about destroying illusions, but I want to at least address the illusions, because our society is built on a foundation of mass delusions and illusory constructs, right? Lately, there's been this argument about how male and female, it's only a construct. It's only a construct. I got to thinking on that. I was like, well, you know what, man? That's actually true. That is actually true, that male and female are only a construct. But then, if we're going to concede that male and female are only a construct, well, then everything else that's a noun is too. Like money, government, religion, corporations, time, morality, fairness, democracy, and pretty much all the other nouns, they're all constructs. So I'm not certain that calling something a construct is an argument for dismantling it. I'm not exactly sure how that works. If you want to get real about it, all of these things are constructs. None of them are something that is so solid that you can point to it and there's proof or evidence of it. Like money is a silly thing, right? Because if I pulled money out of a box of Monopoly and tried to pay you with it, would you accept it? The funny part is you have to stop and analyze real quick. It's like it's ink on paper and it's printed in a certain way. It has numbers on it. Those numbers represent value, right? Why would you take a US dollar but not a Monopoly money dollar? They are exactly the same thing. Intrinsically, they are exactly the same thing. They are a piece of paper with ink on them in a particular pattern, right? You know, and then government is definitely a construct, and government loves to hide behind the fact that you can point at it and point at nothing at the same time. Because when you point at the government, you're not actually pointing at the problem. It makes it very hard to isolate it, right? The government loves that. The complexity of the government makes it very elusive to being observed at a higher level by anybody. They are definitely built on a construct that is a mass delusion and an illusory construct, for sure. Time was the other one that really just bent my noodle a little bit when I got to thinking about that. Time is simply a construct. Like, does it exist? Does it exist because we've defined it? For as much as we know about time and space and reality, we don't know that much about it because we live in the forest with the trees. We cannot pull back to see the forest. That's one of the things about living in this reality, whatever that means. We can't pull back to see what it really is. When I think about how the Matrix changed my belief system on, we know very little about the reality that we live in. We could live in some other reality that we don't know anything about, and we'll only find out at some later time. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't know. And those are the things that scientists have pontificated for a long time, but are so difficult to prove, in a way are all based on individual belief, right? A lot of those things are based on individual belief. All right. Next, I wanted to talk about, I was thinking about Utopia. When I think about all of this stuff, it really swirls the pot. And I really started to think about a lot of different things. And one of the things that I was thinking about is the untenability of utopia. Everybody dreams for utopia, but everybody dreams for a different utopia. Everybody's utopia looks different. And so what I came to the conclusion of about utopia is that you cannot simultaneously design something to satisfy the masses and the individual without infringing on the individual's right to choose or consent. This is why it is a contradiction and cannot exist, because utopia is something seen from an individual's perspective and not the masses. Each person's utopia would look different and would have different rules going on. So that's what I'm going to say, is that utopia is actually something that can't be attained, because utopia is something that occurs at the individual level, not the societal level. You could live in utopia from a personal perspective, but we can't all live in utopia together because there's no way we would all agree on what that is. And that's the problem with trying to go towards socialism. Socialism is the idea of utopia, packaged under the idea that we're going to own our own factories and we're going to do things like that. I'm not against those things. You can own your own factory now. We don't need socialism to own your own factory. So to me, it's like socialism is sold as utopia, but for whom? For the people in charge, for the power. That's what I would say. Moving on. I was thinking about what Will Smith's character says in The Pursuit of Happiness, about how did the founding fathers know to put the word pursuit with the phrase happiness? You know, that's a good point. I'll tell you how they knew. They were all actually very intelligent and thoughtful and knew that government, unchecked, always led to the same outcomes of oppression and misery on the people. And they wanted to try and future-proof it as much as they possibly could against people who would attempt to usurp their intentions by trying to cleverly reinterpret its meaning and language. That's why, in my opinion, the Founding Fathers are the rock stars of government. They created an entire plan for a country that fit on 2 sheets of parchment. And nearly 275 years later, we're still here fighting about a good part of the same things that they did then. See, and that's the funny shit, man, is when you know your history, you will know that for 275 years, they thought every president was going to be the last president. They thought it was going to crash. They thought it was going to collapse. You know, for 275 years, we've been right on the border of it all just failing, right? That's nothing new. Don't be afraid of that, man. It's always existed in that sort of limbo state, right? It really has. So I love how they were smart enough to make our language that they wrote in the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights. I love how they made that language very clear, and they made it very difficult for courts and the powers that be to reinterpret that in a way that doesn't favor their intentions. And see, that's the other thing too, is it's very easy to know the Founding Fathers' intentions because they wrote a lot of stuff. If you read the other things that the Founding Fathers wrote, they outline their intentions. So if there's ever a question about it, you know, it's easy to answer. They act like they don't know what the Founding Fathers' intentions were. It's like, give me a break. The Founding Fathers' intentions were to give us the maximum amount of freedom while requiring the maximum amount of personal responsibility on the part of each individual to not mess that up and to not be a criminal, right? Pretty simple. All right. That's enough of me ranting about that. My next segment is called The Straw and the Milkshake. The thought exercise for this segment is the sea rising, or is the removal of billions of gallons of oil lowering the land, or could it be both? So I went out into the internets and I went to EIA.gov, and they have a thing there where you can find out about how much oil is being pumped and utilized and things like that. They got statistics about oil. And in 2018, the United States consumed an average of about 20.5 million barrels of petroleum per day. And then I went out and I looked up how much oil is the world using. The world is using 34 billion barrels of oil per year, approximately 94 million barrels per day. So to put that in perspective for a normal human being, you know what an oil drum looks like, a 55-gallon oil drum. So 94 million barrels a day is a pile of barrels that's 5,000 by 5,000, 4 barrels high, right? That's every single day we use a pyramid of barrels, 5,000 by 5,000 by 4 barrels high. And do we honestly think that you can withdraw that much fluid volume from the earth for years and years and years and not impact the elevation of the land or the shape of the seafloor? How come I have to be the first one to talk about this? I argue that they don't want you to know this, or they don't want you to think about it, because we will not stop pumping oil because we're so addicted to the convenience that it brings to our lives. You can't pump something into the wells while you pump oil out because it would contaminate the oil while they're pumping it out. So they're not going to pump water into the well while they pump oil out, right? They're not going to do that. So I did some math real quick and I was like, how many barrels of oil are we talking about since this data was published? Because the data that I got was published in 2015. And when I did the math on that, it came out to 136 trillion barrels of oil since that data was published, which is a stack of barrels, 10,000 by 10,000 barrels by 1,360 barrels tall. So we've been pumping that much fluid volume out of the earth, out of the crust of the earth. And we're talking about how much the sea level is rising. Is it? Is it really? Or is it because you've pumped billions of gallons of oil out of the earth and it's not as big as it was when it had all that oil on the interior? Technically, you're shrinking the planet. And that's why I call this segment The Straw and the Milkshake. Because if you stick a straw down into the bottom of a milkshake and you suck on it, you don't remove any milkshake from the top of the surface. You're removing milkshake from underneath. You're removing the milkshake at the bottom of the glass, and yet the surface of the milkshake still goes down and down and down and down and down and down. And that's my point, is that when you remove fluid from a finite volume, which is the size of the earth, and technically what you're doing is removing the fluid from the interior of the earth to the exterior. You're moving it up onto the surface, right? Where now it doesn't have the same relationship to the body as it did when it was inside the planet. And it's the same idea of having like a juice pack would be a good analogy, right? Because as you suck out the fluid, it gets flat. Well, that's exactly what's happening to all kinds of places on the planet of Earth where we're sucking out all kinds of oil. So is the sea rising? Is it really? Or could it have something to do with the 136 trillion barrels of oil that we've pumped out in the last 4 years? When you do the math long term on it, it's mind-boggling. The amount of oil that we pumped out of the earth over the last 50, 100 years is mind-boggling. You mean to tell me that that hasn't had any impact on the elevation of land or the seafloor or anything like that? Give me a break, science. Science is epically failing us right now, man, because they don't give you the real truth about the fact that this could be having an impact on sea levels. We're not talking about like a bed-sized pillow worth of oil. We're talking about billions of barrels every year. So that as a thought exercise, people, that could explain the sea rise. Seriously. Or at least it could explain part of it. So there's news out today about all kinds of folks running amok in America. I may have spoke too soon on that Ebola thing, man, because I saw this article about a whole bunch of people that come from Ebola-stricken countries being released on our country. I still think that that's to some extent fear-mongering, although, yeah, we'll have to see how that one plays out, man. Oh, and then I want to go ahead and wrap this bad boy up because I've been talking a long time and it's about time for me to wrap it up, right? So the things that I want to leave you with today, government isn't your friend. It's not a friend of the people. It's a friend of the power. Always remember that. And then the second part of that is don't let them fool you into thinking that they are in any way your friend or a champion for you, because that is not government's business. They're not in the friend or champion business. So don't get it twisted, people. The government ain't your friend and it ain't your champion, and don't be fooled. Don't let them try and make you think they are. And then last, I just want to go ahead and wrap this episode up and say, hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the Matt Mettler podcast. I don't even know how to thank you. I really don't, man. You guys are great. And slowly this thing builds. Slowly it heads towards something that's going to be really cool. It's like a snowball rolling downhill, right? The more it rolls, the bigger it gets. So I'm just trying to keep that in perspective and all that. Again, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, talk about it, leave comments. You can get a hold of me at mattmettler.com. And I just want to say thank you. And please join me for the next episode of the Matt Mettler Podcast. The Matt Mettler Podcast is a Matt Mettler production. Copyright 2019.